Good evening, everyone, and a warm welcome to the November installment of the faculty lecture series, the speaker series called Experts and Insights. And my name is Magdalena Fark, and I am part of MCC's faculty and also a representative of the Experts and Insights Committee. So on behalf of the Experts and Insights Committee and the whole MCC faculty, I am honored to introduce to you tonight's speaker. Dr. Ribhi Salhi, and he is a faculty member at MCC, has been teaching at MCC since 2008. He holds a Ph.D. in public policies and administration from Walden University, an MA in political science from Northern Illinois University, and an MA in international relations from Roosevelt University. Also, he is an active member of the Illinois Political Science Association. At MCC, Dr. Salhi has been teaching many classes. He's an expert in comparative politics, has been teaching comparative government, international relations, US foreign policy, international terrorism, and US government. We are all eager to learn about the current and relevant security policies that originate in China and Iran and affect the international community. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Ribhi Salhi.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Oh, nice, warm. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening, distinguished scholars and guests and my lovely student. I'm sure it will be a great journey today. You will enjoy this lecture, and I appreciate all the efforts and the time that you put during this crazy weather out there. They said Chicago has the 4 seasons in one day, which is absolutely, they are correct. You will not only enjoy this lecture, but also you'll enjoy, as you know, as you have observed on me before, my lovely and my sexy accent. Thank you very much for coming tonight. I've been studying the government system for a number of years in my life. And one of the things that attract me to keep engaging, to understand government is the nature of the government itself. And I ask myself, many times, several questions. What does make this government to be a democratic one or an authoritarian one? Is it a democratic one because we had a huge level of political participation? Or is it authoritarian one because they don't honor civil liberties or civil rights? I kept driving myself from book to book, from scholars' meetings to other scholars' meetings. I just find out some governments, although we call them authoritarian one, they consider themselves a democratic one. And they don't consider us in the West a democratic nation. These two nations, very interesting, Iran and China, and both experience a bloody force for regime change. So for Iran, they call themselves the revolution of dispossessed. That's where they had to stand up against the tyranny and the supporters of the tyranny, whether it was internal one or external one, and justify the move for in the name of the Lord and in the name of their religious belief and in the name of liberty. Same token, you may find it happen also in China back in 1949 when they drove the regime out from powers and unified their nation. So I took even a farther steps to understand any government in the world. And I thought to myself, okay, since I've been teaching comparative governments for a number of years, what does make government to be a good one or a bad one? So I came up with some paradigms that will help me to understand government. I call these paradigms based on models come from history, based on model come from institution, based on model come from organizational background, and finally based on model that concern about the security concern of the nation. So you put all those models together, you'll come up with one paradigm to understand government behavior. Sadly, since I have 50 minutes to discuss about this, I bet you I could talk about it all night. And I will keep going with this, but hey, let's have fun. So we'll start first of all by looking at Machiavelli. What Machiavelli said? Well, you know, Machiavelli wrote his book, The Prince, and he said, well, very interesting. If you'd like to show up yourself the way that you want, you should do that. And that's what's going on in China, and that's what's going on in Iran. Then you got the religious leaders of the Islamic Republic of Iran, Khomeini, when he discussed the background of democracy for his government by saying it's a revolutionary rage by the people to drive tyranny out and to create democracy with a religious republic, the Islamic State. Now, you look at Mao Zedong. He does not discuss his government, but he said something about a political ideology, social ideology, economic ideology, put the foundation for the government of the People Republic of China by saying communism is not a way to be loved or to love it. It's nothing but hammer can be used against the enemy. So look at the common beliefs for two revolutionary leaders. Khomeini discussed revolutionary rage because of the people lives under suppression, and that's the enemy. And look at Mao Zedong, the same. He got the notion that the best way to get rid of the tyranny and to ensure that enemy is not going to be strong enough to dominate them is communism. So both revolutionary leaders are motivated by certain ideology to resist foreign domination. And that agrees with Machiavelli when he said, well, you need to show yourself the way that you want. So they want to be strong, and that's why they made that strong. This will take me to understand how in the West we understand these things. Now, political scientists around the globe try to study the international politics by dividing the world into either bipolar system, because two rival powers, the Soviet Union and the United States, during the Cold War from 1945 till 1991. Prior to this, we had multipolar systems, the British, the French, the Italians, the German, the Russian, the Japanese. But at the end of the Cold War, we start to have an international system dominated by a unipolar system, or dominated by unipolar nation or empire or power, you call it the United States of America. Sadly, that's power experienced September 11, and because of this September 11, the world changed. And after that, most of political scientists, Joseph Nye from Harvard, Robert Cohen from Harvard, and others from Stanford and Yale and Johns Hopkins University, they start to believe we are no longer into unipolar system, maybe we are into multipolar system. I love their point of view. Respectfully, I need to disagree. I know I'm not as good as those distinguished scholars, but I have the brain, I have the mind, I have the thought, and it's good to prove your hypothesis. We have tripolar system. Tripolar systems mean three dominant powers in the global system. You got the United States is rising, and it's been rising, and you got Russia, now what's going on with Eastern European nation, and you got China. And you look at China and Russia, I bet you they have secret deals with each other, and the Chinese wants to learn about the experience with the Russian, with Ukraine, if one day the Chinese decided to go over Taiwan, which is like because the US over Cuba, and how that could work this. So I am not gonna jump to conclusion, but I will tell you the main idea about that things. China is seeking global hegemony. Global hegemons mean a dominant power within an international system, and you come to me to give you the approval. And the Chinese rely on their historical foundation for that by arguing all the time, we are one of the oldest nations in human civilization as a nation state, and who the heck you are to come to us? That's it. Then the Russians, they have the same. We are the Slavic empires. We've been there before the United States was created as a nation state. Many times I argue with my students, with my colleagues, and I keep saying, did the United States of America cause the whole world of problems? Everybody say, of course. I say, no. The US did not cause any problems at the end of World War II. Sadly, the US inherited world problems because of the end of the colonial system. That's who divided Europe, who divided Africa, the Middle East, Southeast Asia, the colonial powers. Actually, if Woodrow Wilson was still alive back in 1945, he would have pushed for even more peace mediations to end up the war, since he believed in idealist thought. So you took this behavior for these nations, you find Russia is pursuing a global hegemony, and you find China is the same. But where is Iran? Is he looking for a global hegemony? If they have the chance, they would do it. because it's what's a nation of 5,000 years of civilization. But they are looking for a regional hegemon in sensitive spot, which is important for the global economy. It's the Gulf region. This is what we're going to look at it. And I'm using this theory called power transition theory for Dr. Kegley's and Dr. Remond that suggests when there is a dominant power in the international system and someone is rival for that power or is rising for that power, there is possibility to have a high level of tension that might lead into confrontation. So to take this into a deeper examination, I put this outline together. First of all, I want to know what is China. And I'm using Mackinder theory. Mackinder theory was an American geographical person, and he talked about how the nation state, in order to be secure, must dominate the rimland, which is mean to protect the core land. And China is one of them. And you could apply that for Iran as well. And I want to look about the foundations for their government as a result of the revolution. I take the same scale and I apply it into Iran by looking at the interesting characteristics for each nation and how that could shape and influence their relationship at the regional level or at the global level. Now, you get after that, take a deeper, closer examinations for their government by understanding how the social foundations of communism for Leo Trotsky and Mao Zedong and also before them Marx to create the social system in China. And I look at Iran by taking the religion. When the revolution, the Islamic Revolution of Iran took back in 1979, or political sociologists did not think about the religion as a motive to create a revolution. They thought Iran changed everything and brought the religious rage as a foundation for that revolution as well. Then, guess what? To understand their behavior, you can look at the surrounding environment. Okay, why they are worried so much? Like, I'm worried to drive back to Chicago with the snow. Hey, but what the heck, I have a good car and I have a good tire, so I'm well prepared. Same thing, they are worried about domestic concerns that could be used by external forces and could influence the nation negatively and could lead into further challenges for them. One of the biggest challenge for them is disintegration, emulation, marginalizations, and not a full consideration by whom? By the dominant force in the global system, which is the West and their allies. Technically speaking, the United States, the hegemonic power in that case. And I just find out by looking at the dual containment policy that was created back in 1945 indirectly by the Truman administration, how this two nations, Iran and China, could benefit from that dual containment, although this containment policy created to restrain them, limit their powers, but they could use it for their own business and for their own security. And absolutely, you have all kind of means to tell me I disagree with you. And I don't have a problem with this because I'm constitutionalist, liberal, and I believe in the First Amendment to the United States Constitution, freedom of speech. And my students know me as well. Moving on here with that things. Take a closer look to those three maps. Where is China? China is surrounded by rival powers. China is surrounded by rival powers. You get in Southeast Asia, you get Japan. That's a client to the United States. You get Southeast Asian nation. They created ASEAN, the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, to balance out the influence of China in the global system. And looked at China also during 1900 and during World War II. It was victim for foreign powers because of their economic and national and strategic interests. So the realist paradigm in international relations and also to study government suggests China is surrounded by hostile environment. The degree of hostility could be different from time to time, but overall, this is what makes them to be careful and think about the rimland to control what's around them to protect the core land as well. So I'm going to move to the next one over here. Go inside China. China is multi-ethnic society. That's dangerous. They don't have the federal system. They have a unitarian system. Okay, what do you mean there? Because they could face some ethnic nationalism who will demand independence, political integrity and dignity, and because of that, ethnic groups might have external support from the enemies of China in the name of democracy, in the name of human rights, and therefore will be a main threat for the national unity of the nation. So therefore, they kept their eyes open and they put the communists as a dominant force to hammer the enemies. This is their story in a little bit when I look about the Uyghurs, the Muslim separatists, or the Muslim communities that they've been absolutely under all kind of discriminations in China. Now, moving on to the next part over here to understand the main characteristics for China. For the first one, China is a great history, has a great history of human civilization. Marco Polo was there. Everybody knows we learned from China how to use ink, how to use paper, how to use the gun borders, and God knows what kind of food they brought with them to Europe, and it was the Silk Road from there to empower the national and the regional and the global economy in that time. China is one of the oldest nation states in the world, means there was a government system, there was administrative system, there was a bureaucratic system and educational system to ensure the authority of the ruling dynasty in that time. And also, if you look at it, China is a great market for everybody. Henry Kissinger said, China is not Iraq. We could bunch Iraq with the human rights. We could bunch Iran is the same, but China will bunch us if we try to put an economic sanction on it. It's the largest markets in the world and a great human resource as well. Now, also, it's very interesting, as I said, multi-ethnic society. They have 55 nationalities, 100 of minorities. And God knows if we have sub-minorities. And I do remember when I was to look at their history and their also civilization, I couldn't keep up with all those names. Mao, Cow, all that thing. So I said, I'll go with China. It's easier this way. Now, also, what China? China has very, very strong government system. We call it in political science unitarian systems, mean there is centralizations of powers in the hand of Beijing's, the national government, where mean other sub-government or local government or provinces, they must to have the orders from the national government. And as a result of this, that's what the characteristics of the People's Republic of China as a result of our revolution of October 1949. And take a closer look to their flag. It's characterized with the main elements for the society. 4 stars, 4 classes. The working class, the peasants, the urban bourgeoisie, and the national bourgeoisie. What did they say? Bourgeoisie? Marx identified bourgeoisie, those people who lives in the city. And they owns the productions of the capitalism. How come? That's supposed to be socialist. Because China nationalism doesn't matter what the Chinese president met President Clinton a long time ago. He said, doesn't matter what is the color of the cat. What's matter is to catch the mouse. So it's not about communism, because the love of Marx and Engels, it's about nationalism could be used, protected by using communism as a way to bring what? A better respect and a better consideration for me in the global politics, and that's why they call themselves people democracy. Now, we saw the characteristics of China. We're going to see in a little bit the characteristics of Iran. So look at this timeline that suggests for us. I'm not going to go over each one because I don't want to feel like overwhelmed with work, but here is the main things. The historical approach in comparative government suggests for us the main events that shape the creations of the government. So I start by going to 1911, which is almost 110 years ago. Okay, that's when the Qing dynasty was overthrown and China became a failing state. Failing states can be related to, the nation is divided into warlords, and there is no central government to meet the expectations of the people. And because of the warlords, the nation is divided also with authority and loyalty, and that might lead into a civil war. Actually, it did happen a civil war, and because of that civil war, the civil war became internationalized in that time. Every government, every outsiders start to find and support a certain interest on that, in that civil war. Then eventually we get the revolution in 1949. That's where the People's Republic of China was created, and where we have the Republic of China as well. So Republic of China, it's Taiwan, and the People's Republic of China is China, the mainland. The Truman administration did not recognize the communist regimes in China. Instead, they recognized Chiang Kai-shek regime in Taiwan as the only one represent whole China in that time. But they didn't work this way. Until 1979, the Carter administration recognized the communist regime in China, and from that perspective, China became a powerful veto player inside the Security Council of United Nations, and Republic of China out. That's where China became a rising powers globally, diplomatically, in the global politics. So what is the answer? The answer is the US opened up the door for them and to move on in that case. But that was something wrong, that's something correct. I cannot say wrong or not wrong, or correct or not correct. But what I'd say, in global politics, there is something called strategic engagement, to work with the enemy so you could influence the outcome for any possible avenue of relationship. And I'm gonna touch on this in a little bit. Now, what's happened in that things? China, for the last 30 years, if you recall, they've been experiencing the rise of the new generation. Although those new generation thought they will be completely inspired by the cultural revolution that happens in the 60s till Mao died in 1970s, these guys, they learned from the West. And they found the market values. They found the democratic values. They find someone listen to them, but they are not anti-China. They do believe communism was a vehicle for something, and the time is over to get rid of that vehicle and to start with China. And that's what the Chinese government actually has been doing. China is highly capitalized, but they have something called Beijing model. And they've been teaching the North Korean about that, and they've been teaching other governments elsewhere in the world. What is Beijing model? It's mean you remain the man who will approve any foreign investment in China. Because when the British dominated or European dominated China, they brought their own goals, their own rules, their own regulation, no respect for the culture, and that's what we do. That's what we do. China is not anti-capitalism. China is want capitalism to be controlled by someone else and impose on them. They want to politicize capitalism and drive it the way that serves for their interest. That's it. It's the same token in Iran. It's not anti-Western democracy. No, we have Islamic democracy, and we need to drive it in a way could protect us from your future domination, like you did when we had that guy, his name, well, his title called Shah, Reza Muhammad Pahlavi, who was public to the West as well. So look at this. Now we get currently this guy who's really Jig Bang Bang, something like this came up in 2013, and he just was elected for another 5 years. And he is doing a good job for this country, and he's very smart. Actually, he's been cleaning up indirectly from the old school, because he thinks now China is rising, and that rise must lead that point of hegemonic domination elsewhere in the world. Now, why it's important to understand the government? Because the government is the main institution that meets the people's needs, and it's representing for the people at the global level. But to understand the government, you got to find out the foundation of the government. It's the revolution, a bloody force for regime change. The Chinese Revolution, when I looked at all those theories, from Bernard Morrow, Titus Caswell, Said Arjumand, and others, to study their revolutionary theories and how this could happen, they do make lots of sense, but I went to something different. Like this door to come up from here, and that door come from there. I said, I'm gonna come from that door, so I could understand the revolution is better. And I did work. I looked for a special model called Fascos models to understand wars. and how those steps could lead from one to another to create war or to end up with war. So I said, let me take this model so I could understand how this revolution happened. So I'm not going to use the system theory, which is my favorite. I am going to use something else this time. So I put all those historical events into these steps. So, and that's helped me to understand what did drive the government out of the revolution. And look at it over here. What I put on the first step. Foreign interference. Public completely did not find whatever they want, so they demanded, and whatever they demand didn't go anywhere for them. And also the monarchy was vanished in that time, and that's led this nation to be divided into warlords. And that's where the nationalists and where I would tell you then all of them nationalists. It's not, but we are here to understand the sociological elements for the revolution. We divide them. Those guys communist, rebels, those guys nationalist and democratic one. No, all of them nationalists because they work for the purpose of China. And they want China to be not disintegrated, not to be dominated, but the way that you approach was different. So in the first step, we experienced foreign interference by Western powers. And that also followed up with Japanese invasion to the Far East or to the northeast part of China when they occupied Manchuria and they named it Manchukuo. And they create a king and they told him, you're master in Tokyo. That's what we have in that things. So the nationalists did not welcome the Japanese invasion, nor they welcome Western involvement, nor even they welcome anything else. So they end up with civil war, and Mao had to win the public support. He drove his BLA, People Liberation Army, and the Communist Party because he attended some training in Moscow after the Bolshevik Revolution in 1917, and he thought is the best way is violence. That's it. And this violence is justified. The word justified for violence, you're going to see it a little bit in Iran because end and aims to be to terminate tyranny. This tyranny is not necessary to be domestically, it could be externally as well. And look, and that things because of the civil war between all those forces and the internationalizations of the civil war, that where Mao Zedong had to take his followers, and he said, go live in the village. And he developed a new tactics in violence. We call it guerrilla warfare. Hit and run, and hide themselves with the farmers, with the villagers, with the poor people, where will be no strong indications to the enemy to find out. You know what? This is what Taliban did in Afghanistan. They hide themselves in the countryside, and where the US and other forces couldn't catch any one of them because it's hard to distinguish, then eventually, after 20 years of war, it drove back to Kabul. And with that things, that was a Mao tactic. Guerrilla warfare. They applied that into their strategic engagements with the enemy. And when we have that things, Mao said, let's walk to Beijing. The end of World War II, it's about to be an end, and the system changed. He looked globally. He acted locally. He mobilized everyone regionally. And he said, if ever one of you guys is going to fall on the floor, on the ground, bury him, tell him, have a good one, and we keep going. Revolution shouldn't stop. Absolutely. He was able to drive the long march, and he ended up in Beijing on October 1st, 1949, called the birth of the People's Republic of China, while Chiang Kai-shek and his supporters ran away to Taiwan, and he said in Chinese, not in English, we will get you back. That's it. That's the word. And this is what Khomeini said in 1949 when he pointed out to the Gulf region, to the Middle East, and to Central Asia, we will get you back. And he used an Islamic verses from the Holy Book by saying it's only one nation under one God's rules, and these are the Satans. And he referred to the Russian, the Soviet Union. Communism referred also to the United States as well. So the birth of the Republic of China came up as a result of bloody force. But what Mao did, and that's what drove most of political sociologists when they studied the French Revolution, they studied also the Russian Revolution, they defined the state condition as a weak state condition. Means the government is there, but not strong enough to meet the expectations of the people. Now, in China, there was no government. It was a failing state. The nation was divided. He unified that state and he put the road to a status of a strong state. What we have now in China, a strong state model. I am positive they could march to Taiwan in less than 2 hours. And if they could do that, the question is, what are the consequences? They are not goofy. They know there will be a bad consequences when you come for investment because we have foreign investment. But they are monitoring, seeing what the experience of Putin's in Ukraine and how the world is reacting. And that's what, when they are done learning from that lesson, they will take an action. You know, just the other day, the president of China met with the President Biden, and they had so many talks. One of the talks, he said, don't worry, we are not going to invade Taiwan. We are not going to invade Taiwan, but we're going to keep competing with the trade. And that's what we are. Absolutely. Because we believe their economic investment and having the West tied up with us economically, that's what leads us to create a global hegemon for our interests elsewhere in the world. And Taiwan eventually will be on its own to come to us because they did make a statement to two countries with one system. And they applied that for Macau in 1997 and for Hong Kong, Macau 1999 and Hong Kong 1997. And we're going to go a little bit on that part. All right, now, I'm moving to Iran. So we looked at China. We saw their main characteristics, and we saw the revolution and the creation of the government. Now we're going to ask the same question. What is Iran? Look at the map. Based on Mackinder theory, Iran is considered itself not a real tiny republic. That was a Western creation because of the colonial system, like same thing China. Iran is a great empire, dominated the whole Middle East. So when the President Obama addressed Iran back in spring 2009, he was the first American president to congratulate Iran about the Nowruz holidays. That's the spring holidays, like spring break we have, and called them, and he was the first American president called the People Republics of China. Excuse me. And he also praised their cultures, their history, their impact at the regional level, and he said, we are ready to talk. And he called Iran leaders, not leader, not president. Because what's in Iran, they have something, it's well known in Arabic and in Islamic religion, they call it, whatever they discuss it collectively. In other words, democratically. That's what they do, which is they do, and we're going to see that in a little bit. Now, I'm moving on over here to see what's going on in Iran. Same thing was going on in China. It's multi-ethnic society. And all those diversities of cultures and people, that could scare also Iran, that some of them might demand independence and turn against the motherland, and therefore they will find an external support from elsewhere. And that external support is the enemy of the Islamic Republic of Iran. And that's what they said the other day because of the protesters. All those protesters are motivated by Israel, by United States. Stay away. Don't even interfere with us. You had enough protesters in your country, and we never interfered. And that's what they have about that stuff. Now look, one of the biggest concerns that Iran could be face a separatist movement by the Kurds, or by the Baluchis, or by the Arabs in the western part, or by the Azers in the northeast part. So how they put these things away, control the state, impose the Shia's doctrine, and excuse me, that's part of the popcorn. I'm going to sue those guys. The 14th Amendment give me all kind of support for that. equal protection class. All right, moving on. You can't wait till you see me, right? Okay, so you got the multi-ethnic society, and that could be a potential for separatist, and that separatist might face and receive an external support, and we will go from here to know the characteristics. Look at that's the first one. It's a Great Persia. It's not only the Islamic Republic of Iran. And that's mean we are there in the Middle East before your allies. Who are the allies? Israel. What's the other one? Saudi Arabia. What's the other one? The Gulf nation. What's the other one? Jordan. So we are first before all those guys, they come up here. And if it weren't us, they wouldn't be where they are now. Now, you got also other things over here. It's a nation had experienced 4 revolutions. The first one when democracy took place in 1911, they call it constitutional democracy. The second one where Dr. Mossadegh challenged the West, especially those guys for the oil companies, the Great Britain and beyond, and nationalized the oil industry because he failed to reach an agreement with them. And that's where the CIA and the military in Iran engineered a military coup, and that's what the early steps for the Islamic Revolution in Iran. Then the third one, they call it the White Revolution. Like Mao has to do the 100 Flowers campaign and the white cultures revolution to get rid of any Western element in the nation and consolidate powers. Iran also, it was in the Islamic forces, was the government adapted the white revolution to westernize Iran and undermines the powers of the religious class, who really weren't happy about what they are seeing from modernization or from having the West dominate their natural resources. And the nation is divided in 2 classes. One class enjoying all kind of life, and the other is very, very poor. But what they were looking for that is to create a national dignity, integrity for the nation as well. Then that's what we had, the Islamic Revolution. Why consider the Islamic Revolution a religious democracy? Because the religious mobilization, what's motivate the voters? And the leaders of the government, the people who have something, we call it accountability before God. In other words, God's going to come up to your majlis? No, when you die. That's where you're going to be questions on the judgment day. So if you weren't honest, and they take it and they keep it, and that's what the explanation for Ayatollah, that are religious leaders, and that's the sign of it. Now, also move on this one, because they have multi-ethnic society, that's good to create a diversity in the nation, but some fears, as I said, they might be inspired by external forces and called for separatism or independence as well. And this is why Iran, it's been considered a dilemma. And in a little bit, I'm sure we will enjoy more and understand more and more. Now, this is the historical approach for the Islamic Republic of Iran. As I said, I went back to 1910, where they experienced, first of all, the Constitutional Revolution. They created a kind of parliamentary monarchy like United Kingdom, and in new democratic ways like Western countries in that time, but with Iranian style. And although, see what's interesting, when they adapt that model, they found a love and a warm arms from United States to work together and to learn about what's going on in the US, they could have it in Iran. Now, you see after that, okay, at the end of World War II or at the beginning of the Cold War, that's where when you experience the CIA military coup, and that's led to overthrow Dr. Mossadegh because he nationalized the oils industry. He called the chief executive officers for all those oil companies, and he told them, you guys back home, you support your elected leaders, and you expect your elected leaders to meet the expectation because they have money. Now, you guys, you are taking 75% of the milk of my cows, and you give me only 20%, and the other 5% been dumped. We're gonna go 50-50. Didn't work. Therefore, the meeting failed, and they had, next day, he went to the Majlis. Majlis, it's mean their Congress, but it's unicameral system, and he called toward nationalization of Bill of Rights. I'm sorry, nationalization of the oil industry. When this happened, Okay, the British called President Eisenhower and they told him, wake up. A socialist revolution took place in Iran. And he engineered the CIA military coup and overthrew that thing. Actually, it wasn't a socialist revolution at all. I call it was a nationalist one. But what's happened, they had to nationalize the oil industry because they found is the best way to resist Western domination and to show their nationalism as well. No, the revolution came up in 1979. Now, but the beginning, so everybody in the West started talk about the revolution. Iran started in 1973. Respectfully, no. It started earlier than that in 1950s. What's happened in 1950s? When Dr. Mossadegh was overthrown by the military and people went on the street, lots of people were arrested and dumped in jail, and they don't have a due process like we do over here. And that upset the religious class who figured out the military is an agent for Western powers. And one day we have to do it. And what even follow up is when the government of Iran had to adapt the white revolution, mean modernize and westernize Iran by isolating religion away from their way of living. That's it. So in Muslim religion, you have to honor Ramadan, 30 days fast. And people over there, they have to finish work early and go sit with their families and do their religious practices because of Ramadan. Government said, no more Ramadan. You want to do it? You do it on your own. Forget about it. And also they create so many things in Tehran, and Tehran became Las Vegas of the Middle East in that time. So the people did not like that, especially the religious class. And they demanded some reforms that represent and reflect the cultures of the nation. And that became a clash. Sadly, the CIA was working there and gave support for the military, and Iran experienced a state repression. That state repression mostly was directed against the religious class. Jimmy Carter, when he heard about that things, asked the government of Iran to slow down. That will lead to a further tension, which is absolutely became very correct, and that's where Khomeini called the masses to rally against the Shah, and he promised him, once you die in the name of the Lord, it's mean heaven is waiting for you. And absolutely, that was the religious mobilization for the revolution. So while the revolution in China was motivated because of poverty, because of humiliation, in Iran was motivated because of religious rage. That was different. While China experienced a failing state model, Iran had a strong state model. So that shocked all political sociologists to understand the revolution in Iran was religiously motivated, not because they did not have enough foods on the table or beyond. Now they don't have enough food, actually. A long time ago they do, but we're moving to that stuff. Now, interestingly to mention, when this revolution took place back in 1979, exactly February 10th, 1979, where the declare of the birth of the Islamic Revolution of Iran. So we had so many changes, we had so many issues, and the most interesting one, when Khatami in 1997, he called for dialogue of civilizations between Iran and the West. It wasn't welcome such a thing. And also in that time, we had different presidents until we had the last one came up in 2021, Raisi, in that time. So look at this kind of like lines of historical events telling you the hostility is being built up between the US and Iran. And it did not start because of religion. It did start because of state repression by the government of Iran was completely blessed by Western power to maintain their own economic interest in Iran. And that's what drove the revolution to be considered revolution of dispossessed. So again, I used this steps model to understand the revolution, and I found out lots of common things between them and between the Chinese revolution. Foreign interference in the nation. Public demands and they didn't go anywhere, and that's led to create frustration. And And that's where we have more, Western involvement as a result of the Operation Ajax, which is the military coup that overthrew Dr. Mossadegh, the prime minister, in 1953. Then led to have state repressions and popular mobilization that end up with civil violence, because what we experienced, the white revolution, to undermine, the religious class and to speed up for modernization of Iran. Then the regime experienced kind of all internal challenges because they weren't on the same course. So eventually the people had to drive the regime back. One of, according to some political historians I read for them, what's increased the rage of public is this word, sabak. Those guys, kind of like a secret military, a secret intelligence service, who really used to do lots of arrests. They did not arrest the religious class. They are the religious leaders. They arrested their kids. And they had to send pictures back home to their parents if he arrested the daughter, a naked one, or a son sexually involved with his sister or with his mom. And thus they found it completely unacceptable for their cultural norms and turned against the regime. And that's what fueled the people to go against the Shah or against the government, and eventually that's the government would collapse. So the birth of the Islamic Revolution of the Islamic Republic of Iran came up as a result of a bloody force. Now, this will tell us the following. Why in Chinese they consider was a people revolution or a people democracy, or why social revolution? Well, it's so simple. Because they want to liberate the nation from any foreign domination and call for justice and national unity. Now you go take with the same token for the Islamic Revolution of Iran. They define it as the revolution of dispossessed. That's a people completely humiliated, do not have enough resource to be considered or to have a dignity for them, and violence completely has a religious justification to drive the tyranny up. So you take a same conclusion. What was the most common features between these two revolutions is one thing: resistance of foreign domination, because that's the national dignity. So I keep arguing by myself. I said, well, it does make lots of sense. If I live at home and someone from outside is going to come up, live with me, and start to throw on me orders and rules, and although I pay rent for him or anything, I'm not going to take this guy. I'm going to turn against him. That's part of human nature. I'm going to go against this guy, and I'm going to be free. That's what we have in the US, the right to privacy. No one has to be involved with your bedroom or what's going on beyond that things. Now, we know this background for the revolution, for creation of the government, but what is the regime? Well, as you know, from political science, we have three branches. The head of the government is the president, and also the prime minister. He is the man who's going to be selected by the president or by the people to manage the nation's affairs. And we have their National Assembly, what we call it legislative branch, or we call it Congress. China has something like this, but that foundation for this system goes into Leo Trotsky model of creating government by having, first of all, the National Party Congress, which is mean any members of the party, he is members of the political party, he is member for the National Congress of the party, not the government. And he will have dual citizenship in these two institutions, the party and the government. Out of the National Party Congress, the Central Committee will be selected. They are either 204 or 220 or 200, depends on the occasion. And that's one will be selected or elected secretly between all those guys, and those guys, they will take in consideration, select the Politburo office, which is about 20 persons, and that's mean getting more powers in their hand, and overall, they will have a standing committee. Now, Mao created the standing committee not in the beginning of the nation. Actually, he did create it in the beginning of 1960s. Why? Because he heard what's happened in Russia. Now, when Nikita Khrushchev was ousted by the Politburo, and Nikita Khrushchev was ousted, and Brezhnev became the president of Russia in that time. So Lenin thought, well, that could happen. So he created the standing committee to undermine the politburo. And if you study the organization theory, you find there is a rival system, internal rival system between the elements of this organization, and sometimes you need to get rid of some elements. And that's what Mao did. So he had to clean it up secretly, diplomatically. And guess what? The current president of China has been doing this. We saw that on YouTube when he had to remove the old president from that meeting. And they said for health reasons. No, because there were disagreement about how you speak, how you talk, how you meet with the United States. Internal element, internal competition. Then once the standing committee is there, about 10 people, those the guys who will really select the president for the nation. He is the general secretary, and he will go there. So that is Stalinist tactic at the same time, but actually it came up from Leo Trotsky, and that's what we have, this current president, and this will take me to understand what is for Leo Trotsky. Leo Trotsky, you know, the philosophers of the Bolshevik Revolution, and he thought about democratic centralism, which is mean, if you are individual body member, you need to be dominated by the organizations of the party. And if you are a minority in the party, you must be dominated by the majority in the party. And one level of the party, the lower level, should run based on the upper levels in that party. So the standing committee is set up the policies for the one below and the one below for the one below as well. Then the whole party with its organization is dominated by the party National Congress, where they create all those resolutions, then they filter them out and they reflect on it as well. So that's what Leo Trotsky was suggesting for other revolutionary leaders, and that's what became a value must be exported elsewhere in the world. Castro used it, and some dictatorship systems elsewhere in Africa, Middle East, Southeast Asia, they use it, and Mao learn it and apply it and modify it a little bit. So tweak it a little bit. Now, the government in Iran and the government in China, or in China first and in Iran. First, we have the Communist Party, could influence the system of election at the local level. And also because of that influence, each province, which is there are 22 provinces in China, they could be also influenced by the party, and they have their own Congress. And that's the provinces also, they will select the National Congress for the nation, which is unicameral system. They are not a professional legislators. They meet once a year for a couple of weeks, and exactly, I believe, in the spring, or after 2 years, or 1 month, or 2 months, or 1 month after the New Year's in China, which comes at the end of January as well. And look over here, as I explained for you, ladies and gentlemen, that's each level, and that's according to the democratic centralism for Leo Trotsky, is using one higher level to select that things. Then the National Congress for the people will select the Supreme Court. They have 200 justices in that game, and I call them they are rubber stamp because they are not going to turn against their masters. And they select the president who will serve for 2 limit terms, 5 years. Hey, that's social democracy. And the president will select the prime minister, and the body will bless all that selection, and plus also the Supreme Court as well. This is how they work as a foundation based on the democratic centralism. And this is why they argue that they do have people democracy, because the body itself represents the whole nation. Now, you go to Iran, and this is the most interesting and the most complicated structure for the government. Forgive me for this, but I will show it to you by asking the question, who is ruling the government? Look at this shape. Now, the political institution for the nation, which is, we are talking about 3 branches, is the core of the government, but they are dominated by a higher level, what we call it the state religious institution, and they play a strong role for selection and election, and also decision making and accountability and checks and balances. Now, then you find the power of ulama. Ulama, the scholars, the clerics, the religious scholars. What do I mean with religious scholars? The one who memorized the holy book for Muslim? No. The one who studied the Sharia laws from previous Ayatollah. Ayatollah is like the dean in college, and has as a title given to him, it's mean the sign of gods on earth. Well, that's the Shia doctrines. The Sunnist doctrines, on the other hand, in Saudi Arabia and Egypt, They are saying, we don't buy that. No, God did not give you that. God gave the powers for his prophet. The prophet is dead. We don't worship the prophet. We don't worship the man who's going to be after him. We follow the God's rules that mentioned in the holy book for Muslims and also in what mentioned in the hadith. It's mean what been reported by the prophet, peace upon him, to his people, and the Islamic scholars took it and explained it as well. For them, their Islamic ulama or Islamic scholar is the Ayatollah. And the Ayatollah title doesn't come up because you study a book. It's come up as a journey of knowledge and a journey of promotion and a journey of engagement with other religious scholars in that thing. So over here, we have the supreme leader, and that's the most powerful one inside the government, second to the assembly of experts. Then you got over the religious mobilization. We call political mobilization for my student that's on American politics, how to motivate people. So the religious mobilization say, vote for this person because he is completely religious and committed for God's rule. And he is like a man who walks on earth and at the end he's going to heaven. Do not vote for this guy. He doesn't pray 5 times a day. He doesn't pray in the night. He doesn't pray early in the morning. He doesn't also fast the holy month. And he is more than this. Go with this guy and that one. So it's not the power of the money. They call it the power of taqwa. Taqwa, how much deep you have for God in your heart. That's what they do it as well. Now, you got the founding father. That's Khomeini. Then you have the current president, Brahimi. That's the president who's the same, who really following what's going on over here. And he is leading this part, but he is following this part, and his biggest rivals comes from those guys who really could mobilize others not to vote for him in the future. In other words, ladies and gentlemen, in our language in political science, these guys are the delegates and the super delegates, the boss and the machines, based on American politics model. Now, the nation of this rely on the following or the following categories to understand there. I know it's too much to remember these things, but I took it in easier way, and I'll show it to you. First of all, women and men, they could vote in Iran. Voting age is the 26th Amendment. What is the 26th Amendment? Nice. Keep laughing, keep laughing. December 6th, the final exam. I will have the napkins and the scissor too. Voting age is 18 years old. They have it over there in Iran too as well. And what those guys, they vote for their Congress, the Majlis. Majlis is mean Congress. And the National Assembly, it's a unicameral system. And they serve for 4 years. And look how many have. They have 290 seats, while we have 535 seats in Congress, 100 for the Senate, 435 for the House. They have 290 seats, represent all kind of sects in Iran. So if you were a Jewish, they have someone to represent you. If you are a Christian, you have someone to represent you. If you were into the native religion of Iran, the Zoroastrian one, you have someone to represent you. And if you were from all over the place, Shia's doctrine and beyond, or that area, you have someone to represent you. And those guys also, they will vote for the president. The president there, he is the head of the government. It plays the role of the prime minister. And he doesn't have everything within his hand. And we're going to see what are the other sources behind him. Now, and here is what we call them in the US, the Electoral College, which is the Assembly of Experts, 86 persons, all of them Ayatollah, highly educated in religion, and they will select the supreme leader for the nation. While the president will create his cabinet, and he requests the approval from the National Majlis, like we have inside the Senate, these the people will select their supreme leader, and the supreme leader is very powerful because he's gonna bless the changes and anything took place as for the president. Now, but where are the real powers inside this system? It goes inside the Assembly of Experts, the 86th person, and they are in charge to remove the supreme leader. They are in charge even to remove anyone inside the institution. And that's an explanation, ladies and gentlemen, when President Obama addressed Iran back in 2009, he said, I'm calling the leaders of Iran, these guys. Technically speaking, these guys, they were victims of the Shah. And they are hostile to the United States because they suffered a lot and they don't trust the United States. However, the new generation or the young from them that who were inside the revolution, those that became kind of more moderate and ready to talk and to open the system. Like they said, every generation, it brings his own style as well. Now the president could also select another council called Expediency Council, is there for one reason, to mediate if there is tension and between the Majlis and between the Guardian Council. See, this Guardian Council is there. The Guardian Council is there to monitor what the Majlis is doing in terms of legislation, because they don't want to create any law violated the Sharia. The Sharia, in our language, is the Constitution. And inside the Constitution, we have the supremacy clause, that Article 6. No one should violate the Constitution, whether the president or Congress or local government. Same thing, those are the guys who keep their eyes. Like the one we were talking about it in our class today, that's what we call it, administrative committee, to know if the legislature of the National Assembly is doing a good job or is not. Naughty, naughty. Okay, moving on over here. So we have the Supreme Court. It has it's interesting, they have one justice at the Supreme Court, and that will be the last resort, while China has 200 justices at the Supreme Court, and the US has 9 justices at the Supreme Court. Big. Sounds they have money. I don't know how much they make money in that thing. And the Guardian Council will keep monitoring what's going on. So remember China, we said we have a standing committee. They select the president and they vote on it after the National Assembly decided to have it. This is the standing committee over here, the 86 guys, and they serve for 8 years. And before they run, they will be elected and they need to meet a certain knowledge code in religion so they could have people rally behind them. That's what does it mean to have checks and balances, separations of powers, and also the meaning of religious democracy. Moving on over here, and the security concern. At 7:04, I know I was asked to speak for 45 minutes. Forgive me if I jump beyond the line, but can we stay longer, or you are tired? Well, he wants me to stay, raise up your hand. If you don't want me to stay, okay, I'll stop. Democracy we go. So that's it. I see. Very good. Everybody. I'm sure someone don't want to go, but I'm sorry. I give you the chance to participate. Democracy is about competitions. My team just won, so I'm going to stay. I stand. Okay, now what are the security concerns? I'm going to go over to one of the biggest security concerns is the fears China will be disintegrated because so many nationalities. One of their biggest rival is the Uyghurs. The Uyghurs are in Chinese hand. They are from East Turkmenistan. They were hoping at the end of World War I or World War II to have the Republic of East Turkmenistan. And they are Muslim, and they are part of China, and they are part from other Central Asian nations. Okay, so lately they've been arrested and been dragged into special labor camps, and everybody in the world is talking about there is a secret genocide going on in China against the Uyghurs, and the Chinese government even forced them to abandon their religious practices and stop using any Islamic names, like the word Muhammad. It's a famous Islamic name. They don't want them to use it. And when they ever decided to pray, instead of they face Mecca, they have to face Mao Zedong pictures or anything like that. So why China is worried about that part? Because if these guys successfully could break away from China, other ethnic groups could break away from China as well, and China will be the old Yugoslavia. So, or the new Balkan region in that thing. Now, moving on here, what we experience currently, the new generation who demanded an economic reforms, political reforms, and better respect and values for the human rights. And that came up in 1989 when we had the Tiananmen Squares 33 years ago. And follow up with Hong Kong. Hong Kong went back to China in 1997. And currently Hong Kong feels that they are no longer Chinese, they are Hong Kongs. And they are under a state of repression. And the Chinese government begin romancing their leaders by telling them, we're gonna have a self-autonomy. Why? Because they know mitigate that riot and that situation so they could keep any external influence away from those people. Now, moving on over there, China is worried about its own rimland. And one of the things they are worried about is partly islands and Brussels, and that's for them, it's a great natural resources. And Philippines is part of the allies to United States, and other countries are over here to worry about the growing up from China and from ASEAN in that case. So for China, that's part of the world, it's called the missing empire. Why? Because those nations were created as a result of the end of the colonial system. And for China, that's part of the Chinese empire that's been for thousands of years. Same thing when you come to Gulf regions as well. The other problem is here that at the territorial disputes between the Chinese and the Indian because of the end of the colonial system, and that's little tiny one, but led to have the Sino-Indian wars in 1962. Now, moving on with Taiwan, and that's the most interesting things, and the whole world is looking at this. This is the Republic of China. This is the People's Republic of China. This is about like a couple hours away, and we heard about military tensions between both, and the Taiwanese don't want to be part of China. But China is saying one country with two systems. Keep capitalism, keep democracy, but come back to the motherland because you belong here. You are taken away from us because of the end of the colonial system. So what the Taiwanese government said, we have 5 no's. No, 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 no. They add up. The first no is here. We are not going to call for independence. Keep us Taiwanese, keep you Chinese. And we are not going to call for a referendum to see if we're going to have unification or integration or independence. And we don't want to change our title. Keep us the people, keep you the People's Republic of China. We will stay the Republic of China. And also, no need to consider us a nation state, and we will consider you as one people, but has different system as well. And in that case, we're gonna stay the way that we are. We are completely recognized by other countries as an independent nation state, and you are completely recognized by other countries as independent nation states. Both of us are members of United Nations, and both of us could have sovereignty to engage with foreign treaties. The Chinese government said, one country, two systems. You're gonna come back. That's why the Taiwanese, they have a new woman president, said no. So that's what we have, some kind of tension as well. Now, that's the other dilemma for the Chinese, is the North Korean. And this is very interesting. What's going on here? Are we gonna have a war because North and South Korea and wars? In a little bit, I'm gonna explain the dual security system for the United States in these two regions. And what we're gonna see over here, China actually loves to maintain the status quo. North Korea, South Korea, Japan, China. What does it mean? Potential unifications between the two Koreas will be a major threat for China. China will face a new nuke power and a new economic rival. We don't want that. And if there is a collapse on the end of the North Korean, China will face a huge refugees problem. That's what's happened between the two Germanys. And if there is a physical confrontation, you will cost me. So I'm going to use the US as a strategic partners to keep the US in northeast of Asia, could demilitarize Japan or keep demilitarizing Japan, and also be, in our language, a babysitter between these two countries. So neither North Korea will attack the South, nor the South will attack North Korea, and China will invest on that kind of status quo to build more China economic and hegemonic power. So here is the story. I looked at it after I studied the security concern. The US is not interested in seeing Northeast Asia in physical confrontation like the Gulf region. Why? First of all, the US don't want to drag Japan into this kind of physical examinations of war, because Japan has been a peaceful nation, doesn't have a military power. And that will put more military burdens on the United States. And the United States needs Japan to stay healthy economically, financially, so they could contribute for other things called a global regime, World Bank, IMF, and beyond. And also the American-South Korean economic alliance, it's good. And that's been good for a number of years, and the US don't want to jeopardize that, nor the South Korean, they want to do that. That's an explanation why the South Korean told the Chinese, we will adapt the sunshine policy and the soft landing. So we could, if there is a potential unification, it has to be gradually, not a massive one like what happened between the two Germans in that time, where Germany carried the burden of Eastern European and Eastern Germany as well. Then the American-Chinese strategic alliance is good. So the Chinese could control North Korea and telling them, adapt our model, Beijing model, and be quiet. And I would argue all the time, the leader of North Korea, he's completely supported by China, and listen, because that's what the Asian way of dealing any conflicts. So maintaining the status quo for China in northeast part will serve for the interest of China and will ensure its security strong in that manner. Now, look at this map. What you find here, China, why is worried? Because it's surrounded by rival systems. As I said before, you got Russia, you got India, you got Japan, you got the Koreas as well, you got Southeast Asia. Now, in Iran currently is worried about what's going on inside Iran. And that inside the religious class. So the new generation of the religious class are saying, well, the world has changed, let's talk. If they accept our revolution and recognize us, we could have a better things. But the other one, the conservative one, said, no trust in the West. And you don't trust the United States as well. So the election of 2009 was a signature or was an indication for that part. Then also what we experienced the other day about what's happened with this young lady, Mansha Amini, who was arrested by the moral police because she refused to cover her head completely, and they said she died in jail as a result of heart attack. Others, they said no, for being tortured. So the new generation, the one who was born in post of the revolution and who's been through the internet exploring the development of human needs, start to recall and call for protesting, and that's where the Iranian government shut down the internet, arrested lots of people, accused those protesters, been mobilized, motivated, encouraged by foreign powers, the United States, one of them, and Israel, the second one. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to show you the clip. It's about 5 minutes, and I need to tie up everything in 10 minutes. Ben, okay, forgive me for this. Now, the other things over here, Iran is worried about a potential attack from Israel, like Israel did that for Iraq in 1981. And they know what's behind Israel is the United States. So when Iraq was attacked by Israel in 1981, when they were building their nuclear facilities, that could happen also for them. So they kept everything away, and they said, if you move, we will attack you back. And that's what scared the Israelis. What's going to happen? What is next? What could happen? And plus, the United States don't want to take this. It's adapt kind of like negotiation with them. Then look at Iran. Like China is surrounded by rival environment. Same thing in Iran. And all those guys either members of the NATO or an economic and military allies with the United States. And they share somehow kind of historical hostilities as well. Like Turkey is part of NATO. Saudi Arabia, big business partner to the United States, and the Gulf region as well. And you move also to Iran to be completely protected. It's created its own agent by supporting revolutionary forces that fit under some geographical explanation. We call it the Shia crescent. So they support the Shia communities in northeast part of Saudi Arabia, in Yemen, in Libya, in Lebanon, and even in Central Asia. And those guys, they could be the future sleeping cells for potential Islamic revolution as well. Now, with the Syrian conflict and the Iraq war in 2003, that's brought more good things for Iran. Iraq is no longer had Arab nationalists like Saddam who are hostile for them, and the US did a great favor for Iran with that things, because the Shias regime in Iraq now somehow are good buddies for the Shias regime in Tehran. And also same thing in Syria, and that's give Iran an outlet to be close to the Mediterranean region, and that's part of its rim land as well, and a dream for the old Persian Empire. What about ISIS? They've been hostile for ISIS because of so many religious differences, and ISIS is hostile to them as well for a number of things. Okay, one of the things, the hostility is there. They don't trust each other because that goes back to the old civilization of the Muslims nation back in, like I would say, 600 BC or beyond, 100 AD or beyond. And now look at Iran. As I said, there is potential disintegration because so many ethnic communities over here. And the nightmare for Iran is the Kurds. They could be in this part and the Baluchistani if one day gonna break away from Iran and they have the external support. And that could lead, as I said, or give an opportunity for external support. Now, you move on also what we had from the Obama administration as a constructive engagement and reach a nuclear deals with Iran as long as Iran could adapt that things for peaceful reasons or civilian development. The Trump administration did not like such a thing, get out of that deal, and Biden came back and they said, if you want us to go back to the same deal, you need to remove us from the terrorist list as well. Yes. Moving on over here, and that's what is the dual containment policy. Look at those two places. American military presence all over Northeast Asia and Southwest Asia. And that's helped the US directly and indirectly to contain these regions from being rival to each other and being away from into physical confrontation. So how did that thing happen? It goes for the Truman administration when he called Northeast Asia is the Great Crescent, and they called the Middle East as the Virtual Crescent. And that was from the Secretary of State, Dean Axon, during the Truman administration. So let's take these things into a better explanation. Here is what we have. If you look at this, what we have over here. We have Northeast Asia and Southwest Asia, which is the Middle East, and you have a rival system between old governments, Israel, Iran, Iraq, the Gulf nation, same thing, North Korea, South Korea, Japan, and China. In that case, over here, since American military presence in the Gulf region will keep these guys away from not having physical confrontation. And same thing in Northeast Asia will maintain and control these guys from not having a physical confrontation. Sadly, and the best description for this model, the US is the babysitter for these two regions to avoid that kind of confrontation. Now, moving on over here, that's into this case, China, it's been rising because that could pose a threat. That's what they asked that question. Their economy is unstoppable. Their economic development unstoppable, and that reflects in their military power. And when every time they celebrate in the days of the revolution in October, they bring their achievement, and they do have good military force sources as well. And now, what are the options to the United States? There are two schools over here. The first one, pessimistic, saying, let's contain China and work to disintegrate it so it could be completely dominated. Other, they said, forget about that school and let's work with them. Maybe we could find a better solution since they are members of global organization like the World Trade Organization, and they are members of the Security Council of the United Nations. And you cannot ignore them. And that's one of the recommendations by Dr. Henry Kissinger, the former Secretary of State during the Nixon administration. Now, for Iran, what is Iran? What the Iran wants from the West? First of all, you need to understand, a people of civilization for the last 5,000 years. So when George Bush called me axis of evils, they accuse him for being ignorant. You don't know nothing about world history, world politics, world geography to call me. Who the heck you are to call me axis of evil when we've been in this globe before even you come up into this globe? And also, they are a regional power in sub-regional system, the Caspian, South Asia, and the Gulf. And they are surrounded by hostile nations who are allies to the US. And also they are arguing, like you had a revolution back home to create your own nation state and to be honored, recognized. We, our revolution, have the right to secure our civilization, our culture, our destiny, and needs to be honored by you. And also on the top of that, we are not authoritarian regime, we are a religious regime. That's what they believe, and that's what sometimes misunderstood by the West. And therefore, if you need to have stability in the Middle East, you need to have us to be accepted as well. And that is why Iran is a dilemma. Now, so look at this kind of description over here. When the revolution took place in 1979, Ronald Reagan came up after this and called Iran pariah state. Clinton called it a rogue state. The Bush administration called axis of evil state. Then eventually Obama called the Islamic Republic of Iran. And when the assembly of experts, they said we need to see more. More, it's mean you're gonna stop accusing for us for being a terrorist, and you have a relationship with Israel at the expenses of the region, and also we are not an American lake to be dominated. So we are talking about nationalism on both sides, the Iranians and the Chinese, and that's why they are rival systems. So I come up with my paradigm, which is I use that in my doctorate dissertation to understand terrorism, since those two nations, okay, practice certain way, completely unacceptable in the name of human dignity or in the name of political participation. There is something common involved. We call it state repression because they are afraid. Because they are afraid. That's it. And where does state repression fit by understanding violence and terror? It does fit under this kind of category when a nation state supports terrorism or when a nation state adapt any kind of methods to control its people. We call it state repression in Iran. We call it genocide in China. Thank you for coming, and I apologize if I took that long, and I apologize again if I did not meet your expectations. Happy to have all your questions. Yes, sir.
You said you alluded to a tripolar world, United States, Russia, and China. Would you consider India as part of that mix?
Well,
With nearly as many people as China, with the need to develop, and it seems that there's more geopolitical cooperation between India and China, although they're rivals, than there is between them and the West.
is India part of the Security Council of United Nations? No, respectfully no. The Security Council of the United Nations has 5 members. The first one, the US, the second one, Russia, the third one, China, the fourth one, UK, and the fifth one, France. Now, if we need to add India for this, Germany is going to say, what about me? And Japan is going to say, what about me? And Brazil is going to say, excuse me, what about me? So Dr. Joseph Nye from Harvard said he would disagree with me, it's a tripolar system. He said we have a complex system with the United States and active members for that things, and he add up the NGOs as a pillar in the system. Now, Samuel Huntington, who passed away back in 2008, and he wrote that Clash of Civilization, he did not think about polarity system, unipolar or bipolar. He said the West will dominate the world, and the potential clash is come up as a cultural one. Everybody believe him. Just Putin went to Ukraine. That's because of cultural or because of national interest and Slavic nationalism. And now they are there. Can we use the veto against Russia? Now we have, yes, I understand we have proxy war, but India is not capable to be a superpower, but might be a rival power for the region and could happen in the long generation. And that's what we are saying. The system might end up with multipolar system like what we had between the two wars. So I will stick with my theory, tripolar system based on this current experience, what's going on. Thank you for questions, excellent one. All right, any question? What is the 28th Amendment to the United States Constitution? Say it again? Excellent. They're going to have one, they're going to say anyone who was born in Jordan, taught American politics at McHenry County College, he could run for American presidency. And that's what that 28th Amendment. All right, any questions? No questions. Matt, go. Between the Sunnis and Shias? Oh, like the Catholic and Baptists. Well, yes, there are some religious differences between both. And that's mostly related to something we call it Vilayat Faqih. The Shias believe that's the religious scholar, which is Ayatollah, it's the mediators between them and between the Lord. And the way that you practice religion somehow is different because they interrupt it. The Sunnis, on the other hand, they said, no, we don't have Ayatollah. You have a direct relationship with God, and that's it. That's it. And they have only their own religious practices as well. Like, for example, in some areas, in social aspects, you could get married in the Shia and you could get divorced next day. In the Sunnis, you cannot do that because the purpose of the marriage is to have a family and to stay with your wife. And the rest of your life, unless it didn't work, that's a different story. Then also the Shias, they believe that has to be a man come to save the world. That's the great Ayatollah and the great Imam. It's been missing. The Sunnis, they said, no, once you are dead, you are dead. The only time you're going to have resurrection is in the judgment day. So they have some minor interpretations for lots of things in the religion. I teach comparative government, and I talk about Iran a lot. If that interests you, you're more than welcome in the spring. All right. That's it. They have a good coffee outside and popcorn. Thank you for coming. We'll see you guys. It's been a pleasure.